Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Would you please show the slides? This session is B1 breakout session, Visions of an Urban Future. The subtitle is Redefining the Value of Distance and Density. First and foremost, I would like to introduce the four speakers. I would like to briefly introduce them. The facilitator is myself. I am the partner and associate director of Boston Consulting Group. My name is Hamura. In the past, I have been involved in different kinds of digital platform companies, and after that, the city-related project and smart city-related surveys and consulting services have been provided by myself at the Boston Consulting Group. The three speakers for today's session, Anju Ishiyama-san, a social activist, as you can see. I think she is the youngest sharing economy evangelist. And Sharing Economy Association, she sits on the board. And she actually belongs to the millennial generation. I think you have come of age after 2000. And she also serves as the public media innovation. Sharing economy perspective, which is extremely important in this era. She's going to talk about that. And then millennial generation, who is going to play the central role in the future, and she's going to talk about that aspect as well. And next, Keisuke Toyoda, he is the professor of the Institute of Industrial Science at the University of Tokyo, and he also leads organizations such as Noiz and Gluon. Originally, he worked as an architect, and not only the architecture, but also city and technology, and how the technology is going to make a change, and how the business is also going to be changed. The instinctive approach has been provided, and in 2025, he is leading the project for 2025 Expo, and how the future of the cities are going to be impacted. Next, we also have a guest from Spain, Andrés Rodríguez-Pose, and he is a professor of economic geography at the London School of Economics. And he has a wonderful track record. So most recently, post-Covid19, post-pandemic, how the cities are going to change. This kind of a study is conducted by the professor. And from that viewpoint, first and foremost, Andrés-san is going to make a presentation. He is going to be the first speaker.
From Spain in the very early morning, I guess, right?
Yes, thank you very much, Masaki. It's my pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank the Mori Memorial Foundation for giving me the time to be with you.
Prior to Andrés' presentation, the pandemics and the city, this is the topic we are going to pick up in the session. Now, looking back the history of cities, for example, the ancient Greece, including other periods, there were different kinds of pandemics which the humanity experienced. And in this kind of a situation, the structure of the cities and the people's life were also subjected to change. The pest, for example, the plague, this really had a lot of impact. And most recently, about 100 years ago, the Spanish flu hit Japan as well. And over 50 million people died as a result. And at the time of the Spanish flu, there are many things that are still going. For example, the the birth of modern urban planning, zoning regulations, and development of sewage and waste treatment facilities, or the regenerating open green spaces, and the modern architecture using large openings, which are quite typical in the modern architecture. And on the technology side, the beginning of shopping by phone. At the same time, radio, magazines, newspapers, the so-called mass media emerged during this period. And stay home, and shopping is done, and the creation of consumer markets through advertising. The next one is accelerating the use of private-owned cars, increasing public use of cars and rise of leisure activities. That means it didn't happen because of the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, the trend that existed accelerated or new and renewed the focus on the chance of a pandemic. So these are the two aspects. At the time of the Spanish flu, for example, the trend and the spread of recreational use of privately owned cars in the United States, and gramophones and novels, that kind of media format, enjoying the music and reading books at home, the popularity and spread of such things did exist. And the trends in garden city initiatives, which is some project that the current government is trying to pursue. And the Taisho democracy that started in Japan, it was imported from overseas. And after the decline of Taisho democracy, and the lower underclass people started this Taisho democracy following the pandemic. And in 2019 and 20, a COVID-19 outbreak. Until yesterday, 5.17 million people died.
Regarding the environment surrounding the city, we talked about the automobiles as well as mass media emergence, telephones emerging after the pandemic, and similar trend is seen now. Facebook has changed its name to Meta, and the Metaverse is being promoted. And for the 21st century, Time is saying that in 2006, Person of the Year is selected, and you was the first time that was selected. So each individual is now becoming more important. For the Pope, when he became the Pope, 2013, 2014, in the past 8 years, there have been significant changes. And 8 years ago, the situation has changed. We all have computer terminals, devices in our pockets now. With that, the centralized society has changed now. It is now becoming distributed. Hypercommunity is now coming to the fore. It's been like this for some time. Sharing economy is a new movement. This is 2005 and 2013, and centralized and decentralized, and sharing community and valuation economy is what we are seeing in terms of economic space. In considering the city in terms of digitalization, what is important is written in the after COVID age. In the past, it was going back and forth between real and digital, but if we take into consideration the time that we are living in, on top of digital, there is real, and there is connectivity. Because we met for the first time with the panelists on a digital online. And this is a real-time encounter for the first time, but it's not really the first time. So it's because of COVID-19, and it does not seem foreign to us anymore. So significant changes are taking place. Now COVID is taking place. So I think COVID followed thereafter. So what is going to happen to the future cities? This is what we'd like to discuss. First of all, we will be discussing what is going to be the future of the city. You have boards in your hands, so I'd like you to write this down. Ishiyama-san, would you like to show the board now? Or there is also slides that I'd like to share with you. So this is what I created. It's Harmonizing Commons. So various data and nature are connected and merge. People and things will be connected. This is going to occur in society going forward. And in this context, commons must be shared within the community. I think that will become very important. But it is not just connectivity per se, but each individual must work together and consider the whole to work in harmony. And that will be increasingly important.
Then why don't we go to Toyoda-san?
This is also another key word. And it says quantization. Quantization is very important. Quantumization. So quantum dynamics was introduced prior to the Spain flu. For individuals as well as for groups, not close to the thing, but we are 30%. We are here, but the 30% could be elsewhere.
So instead of just going to the office, when it comes to the personalized identity, it is quantized. So it is a kind of a positive phenomenon. How is this going to be linked with enhancement? I think it is a good challenging thing. Quantization means a wave as well as particles. And when they are going to be turned into particles, the embodiment related to the issue, and what is going to be the value to be considered. And I think the cities should be considered from that kind of viewpoint. The real world is going to be quantized, and then there will going to be the commonality to be pursued based on that. The reality does exist, and what is the value to be carried? What is the relationship with the cities? And that's how you have framed the discussion in the introduction of the panelists. And I think there are young people included in the panelists. You always have a lot of titles. You have different kinds of faces. And Toyoda-san, you also have different faces. We are hybrid. And when I appeared together with you, Ishiyama-san, I was using a different title. So there's going to be a change in terms of quantization. There are going to be the harmonized commonality to be pursued. Ishiyama-san, over to you once again.
So I will be talking about the future of the city. What I would like to share with you is the values of affluence. Richness measure differs from region to region. Please show my slide now.
So I believe there are influences by COVID, and I think there's something accumulated over the past 30 years. But the scale or metrics of affluence is changing today from left to right. The social assumption is changing from growth to live with risks, and we today have limited and dispersed resources. And in terms of standard of value, rather than working hard and owning something, sharing experiences and values may have higher priority. And in terms of cities, you imagine skyscrapers, and there's a big enterprise as a tenant, and you may earn 10 million yen a year by working for that company. I apologize for Roppongi Hills, but the sense of attribution, or what is affluence, richness, is shifting from depending on a big brand to depending on multiple small things. If A doesn't work, you can go to B. And that is true in one's professional career and personal life. And this valuation economy or sharing economy, when they continue to evolve in the global economy, yen has been becoming cheaper, but the value of your assets is forced to change in today's economy. Therefore, people may shift their views for personal asset from money to connection with people. I believe such changes are going to be essential going forward. Next is change of expectations for a community. I am a member of a committee which thinks about regional revitalization. So this is showing changes in expectations for a region or a community. I also think that there are shifts from left to right side of the slide. So you may imagine building attractive buildings or department stores. That may be the brilliant future image of a city in the past. But I'm not sure if I can say among the young generation, but I think people are starting to cherish what is already there and the history and tradition of that community. Maybe people feel attracted by something from the older times. In Oita, I have my another home, which is a very old house from 100 years ago. When you're living in an apartment in Tokyo, you cannot do anything. You cannot even put a poster on the wall, but you'll be able to paint with your favorite color if you're living in an old house. So that's one example. And there's change in lifestyle. I think people were attracted to move to a new place or have a holiday home, but that was only allowed for rich people. And my house in Oita, its rent is 20,000 yen per month. So when you're not living there, you can use that property to lend to people to earn rent. So I think we have this kind of seamless mobility in today's lifestyle. So moving on to the next slide. In modern cities, companies and governments led various development initiatives, and citizens were customers living in the consumption society. I really felt that on the March 11th. When the service infrastructure stops, I felt that I'm in a very a vulnerable position that I can only consume. In order to develop a sustainable community, I believe it is important that there are platforms and opportunities for citizens to take the lead. On the other hand, there are reasons why participation by citizens is difficult. One is because of social capital. It is difficult to build social capital. We used to share bathroom with or family members in the past, but if you have enough money for yourself, you can do whatever you want living on your own. And it has become difficult to casually communicate with your neighbors, and they cannot nurture their civic pride because they are merely customers who receive the service. It is difficult to nurture civic pride among citizens. And I'm going to skip this because this is close to what Hamura-san explained earlier. But harmonized commons, where various resources are shared, and by being connected, we will be able to develop a city where citizens take the lead. And I brought this because I wanted to use it as a topic of discussion. But the key for harmonized commons is to raise awareness for symbiosis or coexistence. So assumption is individuals, and we have clear boundary between ourselves and the others. That is a Western sense of values. But in the Eastern or Oriental values in Japan, perhaps we intrinsically have these values that we are a part of the whole. So you introduced that Oriental values, and especially in the past 10 or 20 years, mainly among the younger generation, they are having stronger awareness of problems, and they have been boosted by COVID. So is it really happening in the society? As a professor of London School of Economics, Andrés has data to explain the current situation.
Hello, and hopefully you can hear me now. Thank you very much, Masaki-san. So I'm glad that the sound problems have been solved. And without further ado, I'm going to share my screen to present the vision that not just me, but my colleagues, Richard Florida and Michael Stolper, have of cities in a post-COVID world. And I'm going to start by highlighting that in many ways, many consider that COVID-19 has been a game changer for cities. Before the pandemic, for the last few decades, what we had was a situation in which we had winners, and the winners were mainly big cities in which economic activity was becoming highly concentrated, and that led to a huge polarization between the largest cities, the largest agglomerations, the primate cities, and the surrounding areas, mainly medium-sized cities, towns, and rural areas that were losing out. And that was having consequences in many parts of the developed world, in which there was a reaction against a system that was perceived to favor the big cities, with the emergence of anti-system parties or outright revolt in the cases, as you can see here, of many parts of Europe, but also with the US, in which smaller communities and rural areas actually rebelled against the system. The arrival of COVID was considered to lead to a significant change. COVID, first and foremost, hit large cities that were locked down, and a lot of activity started moving with remote working to medium-sized cities, to towns, and to rural areas that were considered to be the winners. But is that the case? And this is what I'm going to be discussing in my presentation. The situation is that COVID-19 has brought about three significant forces of change. The first one is the social scarring, which is the fear that has been instilled in many of us of getting a contagion from COVID-19. And that has been also the psychological fear that has been instilled as a result of sometimes relatively lengthy lockdowns at home. The second change has been the changes that have been made to the physical environment to maintain social distance. And the third type of change, which I think is probably the most important, is that overnight, what we have had is we have been forced into lockdowns, and that has accelerated, as Masaki-san was highlighting when he did the presentation, a massive amount of changes that were happening before, and we were expected to have years, if not decades, to adapt to those changes. They have happened overnight. When you put all these forces together, what the pandemic has done, it has changed the way we work. We have gone overnight from working in an office to working remotely, in the way we shop, in which the uptake of online commerce that was already here, but has been massively accelerated since March 2020. And also, as a result of that, it has changed the way in which we often interact. We have, for example, this sort of meeting, which we're doing online in terms of just everyone being in person in Tokyo, as it would be the case. And when you put all this together, what you have is more online shopping, more remote working, more online interacting is going to affect, or is affecting relatively quickly, the way we figure our cities. This is a picture, for example, when you see over here, of a city in the UK, in England, in 2020, in which the massive increase in online shopping has led to, or accelerated, what is known as the retail apocalypse. What we have is boarded shops in the city center, many of which are not reopening at the moment because some of them have folded as a result of the pandemic. Empty offices from people working remotely, or offices in which you'll have 1/3 or 50% of the occupation. And if you have less shoppers, if you have less workers in the city centers, you end up with less demand and therefore less offer for leisure activities, for theaters, for cinemas, for restaurants, for sports activities, and other types of activities. So when you put all that together, this creates a pressure on cities that has accelerated transformations that were expected to take time, and is going to alter, or is regarded to alter, the relationship between cities and its surroundings, but also the internal configurations of cities, what we call, on the one hand, the macro geography of cities, and on the other hand, the micro geography of cities. What happens in terms of the micro geography of cities? What has been promoted has been the idea that the pandemic would allow economic activity to happen almost anywhere, that the long-term process of concentration would be reversed, that the concentration of activity in Tokyo or other large Japanese cities like Osaka, Kobe, and Nagoya, or in Paris, could be reversed, and you could have people deciding to live and work in the Alps, not having to be forced by the tyranny of having to have an office in Paris or anywhere in France. But is this happening? We're coming out in many parts of the world out of the pandemic, and we're seeing that this is not really happening at the moment. That in fact, many of the cities like New York that lost significant amounts of population to the Hamptons or to the Hudson Valley or even to Miami, this population has returned and the city seems to be booming. That the takeoff of big cities continues and they thrive, whereas many areas that benefited at the beginning are struggling and many others never benefited. So where you had many small towns and rural areas, very few actually got this new influx of workers, remote workers. The majority didn't get them, and those that got them, some of them are still doing well, but many are losing out. So the pre-pandemic polarization between very dynamic big cities and more declining small towns and rural areas is probably going to be here to stay. What is more likely to happen, and we're seeing that, is the change at the micro geography level, what happens within the cities. As I said, less use of office space, less demand for retail space within the inner city center might also mean less commuting into the city, might also mean that there's more let's say, real estate available, and therefore there might be a change in use within the city center in the short term. What we are seeing is that although prices are booming across most of the developed world in real estate, the booming mainly is taking place in those areas, mainly the city suburbs, very close, very accessible to the city center, that have more space and offer more green space, offer more protection from future pandemics, offer more better conditions to work and to live and to shop from home when you have more green spaces, when you have more space at home. City centers are recovering, but they are recovering more slowly. And if we have a trend towards more hybrid working in which we move and work in the office, not 100% of the time as before, but 2 out of 5 days a week or 3 out of 5 days a week, that would mean less pressure on space and office use in the center. And that would perhaps keep in the medium term a downward trend towards inner city prices. That doesn't mean that the city center is not going to rebound. What is happening is that it offers an opportunity for new thinking and new uses, and it would take some time for the city center to come back to where it was. And here is where we have a lot of new thinking. We are thinking, and there's new trends of thinking about creating a new creative city, new residential uses in the city, bringing in more creative classes, going for open cities. The whole idea by Moreno that has been implemented in Paris of a 15-minute city in which city center citizens will live within 15 minutes of most of the services that they need, or looking for a more leisure city. What I want to highlight here is that the microgeography in the short term is going to change. The balance between the city centers and the inner and outer suburbs is going to be altered, but that doesn't mean the death of the city center. The city center has had periods of crisis in the past and is likely to rebound, and is likely to rebound once again after time. But it would imply for many cities rethinking how we see the city center. And here there are different strategies that are being adopted. Those cities that are bolder, those cities that go and embrace the transformation better, those cities that adopt measures now and don't wait, are the ones that are probably going to be in a better condition to actually reinvent themselves and become more dynamic and grow faster once again. Thank you very much.
アンドレさん、ありがとうございます。
Thank you, Andres. So, we just heard presentation from Andres, and I have been actually promoting a similar theory. So, in large cities, we are seeing more accumulation of cultural capital. So people who are living there, affluent people will live there who can afford the rent, but the central city exists as a place for brilliance and attractive activities for most of the people. So there's also 15-minute neighborhood that you mentioned earlier. That's the new edge city, and the outer circle is the suburban rural city. I just noticed that the slide isn't being showed. I apologize. So this is the structure that I've been talking about. So this is my vision of the future, and this is a question to Andres. So, in how many years do you think your visions will be realized?
This is already happening, and many cities are adopting measures. Some cities here in Europe are at the forefront of transformation. Paris is leading the way. We've seen that Milan, we've seen that Frankfurt, we're seeing that Munich, Copenhagen are adopting measures that are transforming already the whole way we conceive cities. This idea of more of a city cultural city that you were highlighting, this idea of a city that is more of leisure, is one that has been implemented. A city that is more accessible, that offers more open spaces for citizens, is already taking place. And those cities are likely to take not just the initiative, but also to grab these new opportunities better. The let's say the lower demand of space for offices and retail may also offer opportunities for new groups, more dynamic, let's say more creative groups to come into city centers. And creative groups, we know from past transformations of cities that plant the seeds for future transformations and dynamism of cities. So this provides an opportunity. Here, the question, when is this going to happen? It would very much depend on how fast there's a change in use, and second, on how fast decision makers within cities embrace those changes and act quickly on them in a way that is adequate. If we keep on having a city that is a city mainly for the cars, is a city where people cannot meet and join, is a city that still has fear of contagion, we are going to end up with less risk-taking cities and therefore less to gain in the medium and long term.
ありがとうございます。そういう
Thank you very much. So from such a viewpoint, in the near future, well, according to the slide, so in 2024, I believe most of these changes will have happened. But the movement of harmonizing commons and these new group may not come to the city center, and the quantumization of people was another topic. So when we will be able to experience this kind of world or city, let's think about 2040. So we're going to have Expo before that, but 2040 is 19 years from now. So 2002 is 19 years ago. We didn't have smartphones, but we did have cell phones, and we all used Google. Facebook is about to begin, and the pandemic was in the middle of this journey. And then when we look at 2040, how do you think? Andrés emphasized that we still have the same importance of the city center and the concept of density. The importance of that concept in the real world will never change. But on Slack, it is possible to create ideas, to come up with ideas. But that does not have to be in a city. We can live in multiple locations. And inspiration may be born from Oita on a rice field, for example. And when we think about such situation, how do you envision a city in 2040? And how do you envision the functions of cities in 2040? Toyoda-san?
そうですね。
So, I am going to Mori Building, and in Minato Ward, I think they should not just be in Minato Ward, but to go to the resort area or go to the outlying areas. I think that is important for Mori Building, because territory for such a development as Roppongi Hills is bound by territory. But on that hardware, there has to be a service as well. And it should go beyond the territory, provide to beyond the territory as well. So it would be win-win. Soft provider will be required as well. So I think a Mori Building should develop in an area like Gotanda. I think that will provide more value. They should not just be in Minato Ward. Machida, Shonan, and Karuisa, or even region areas of Japan. coffee chains could be developed, could develop agriculture as well. So there has to be, it could be more diluted, but should be more expanded. So 30% urban is possible, and 20% could be in the regional areas. So I think various options should cover all domains. It may not just be developed, the developer's domain. So I don't think model building or developers should be bound by a certain location, a certain place. Micro geography was mentioned, and macro geography was also mentioned as well. It's macro and micro is also relevant in terms of micro or macro, which is limited to the urban area, or it could be in macro and micro layers can be connected based on need. So the hard environment should be provided, which will enable such a process. And the macro geography and micro geography will always be connected. I think that is the type of development that is required going forward. Andrés has mentioned macro geography and micro geography. This is in the context of the past city environment. And but this will change. Macro geography will change. But Andrés, I think you have actual experience. 2040, that's 20 years down the road. I think the city environment will be completely transformed and different. Whether it is digital or real or urban or the regional areas, I think it boils down to where people connect. The connectivity of people and emotions. If that can be promoted in the metaverse, that might be the case. But perhaps people will be able to enjoy a festival-like environment when people come together physically. And I would like to find out what is going to happen. In my personal case, I have residence in Shibuya and Oita. And Shibuya has more density, and we are living very closely together, really packed and dense. But even in the remote areas of Oita, I feel more connectivity with people. So if you live in a condo, we don't even know who is living next door. When there is an earthquake, we can't ask the person next door to help because we don't know who is living there. Even though population density is so high, why is there a lack of connectivity? Why is there a lack of emotion? This is where I am feeling my emotions and connectivity shifting to the rural area. And this is not just in the physical world, but also in the digital world as well. How many hours are we spending time on the smartphones? It could be half a day because it reports to you how many hours. So maybe we are residing in our smartphones as well. Perhaps this is a case-by-case difference. I think this environment could be more emotional and more exciting. But it could change going forward. I think it could change in 2040 significantly. So places and things is infinite in terms of possibility. But the information that can be provided used to be zero, but it's becoming immense. But we would not be able to acquire all the information. 3, 5, 10 more information will be available to us, and it could be more downloaded and enhanced experience. Extended experience is what is required. If we go to that place, it could be further amplified. Enhanced experience can be provided in a certain location. This has to be organized, obviously. But if we can do both options are possible, and we will live our lives by always making the selection, and this will come naturally to us. This is a business or a house. We don't know what the information is going to be extracted, whether it is going to lead to business or lead to social contribution. It is very fragmented today. I think we have to better organize this information, especially in terms of digital experience. What is it? Is it extended or enhanced? And that is very important. So we are always looking at this kind of picture in terms of urban development. But I feel that this is dystopia. In the middle, we have people who high net worth people living in Roppongi Hills. Mori Buildings world is in the inner city. All the rich people in the world are living here, having a luxurious life. There are famous hotels. That is the inner city. And people who... There is also the black area between the inner city and New City. In order to... this is the logistics people, and because we are eating and there are products that have been transported, there is service that must be provided. So this is the black ring. Essential workers are living in the black ring. They are forced to live there to serve the inner city and the new city. But can they experience something enjoyable in the city? Is that possible? Or can they live in the suburban area and operate perhaps private lodging? I don't think so. That is very difficult to do. So combining digital is in a film I saw, Spielberg's film, I forgot the name, the Metaverse film. Ready Player One. They are living in this black ring. And in that context, what is the experience? 24 hours, 365 days, real experience and digital experience are mixed. And in the overall experience, the combination of the city components will be important. I would like to ask a question to André. Regarding what we have discussed in Europe, it's very difficult to generalize, but for Paris and London, it seems, perhaps New York as well, it seems that in the high-end area, a major redevelopment taking place. Is there available housing provided for low-income people as well to maintain diversity? Is that embedded in the system? I think that's the trend in Europe. Andrés-san, are you still online? Oh, he's not available now. But I think it exists as a system. So to legislate that is going to be very important. As Hamura has mentioned, I am from the new town, which is a clean land in Chiba Prefecture. And same social class came to live at the same time, so it's aged population now. So we should have a more sustainable mechanism. It was a grand experiment. So what did we learn from that experience? And for the Mori building, super high-end redevelopment of Mori building, what should be the next proposal? Europe and the United States, in terms of social setup and implementation, is more advanced. That is the reason why I wanted to ask Andrés. And Ishiyama-san is doing this on grassroots. And I think knowledge accumulated should be escalated to upper layers. We have about 15 or 16 more minutes left. André is back. André, I have a question for you. I have a question. Is that all right? So, in Europe, it's very difficult to generalize the whole region. But in the luxury redevelopment in the inner city, I still believe that there is a diversity residence provided for a middle class or even lower class than that. In Zurich and other cities, I see such diversity being embedded. To have diversity even in a redevelopment which is high end. Does that exist in London or Paris or other major cities of Europe?
Very much for your question. And as you highlighted, this is something that varies enormously from one city to the other in Europe. So there's no one trend. When you talk about cities like Vienna, or you talk about cities like Stuttgart, or the Scandinavian cities like Copenhagen or Sweden, a lot of the new developments are either mixed use or social housing. And therefore, you end up with a situation in which you have within the same neighborhood, but also within the same building, a new development, with a mix of people from different origins that actually creates neighborhoods that are much more mixed. In other cities where new developments are happening, albeit at a relatively slow level, like in the case of London or the case of Paris, where the availability of space is much more limited, although many new developments do have some provision for, let's say, lower price housing. Most of the situation is that first, the uptake is mainly by absentee owners or absentee landlords that haven't been able to move in before because of the pandemic, or mainly through a speculation. And therefore, that creates a problem, and an important problem, that you have less mixed neighborhoods at the moment, and the development of new buildings is mostly generating gentrification, and also not leading to any significant decline in house prices, because it's been taken by relatively wealthy owners that may or may not be living in the new apartments that might become the second or third residence for them, or maybe used just as an investment.
Thank you. In the case of Japan, that there are some conditions attached to new development. Where, with regard to the digital side, when it comes to the hardware and legal side, there should be a room for improvement in that kind of area as well. Right. Speaking of the city dynamism, there should be that kind of mix from the urban economics viewpoint, that the people of the same group get together. That kind of a trend. How is this going to be addressed by the city planning programs in order to maintain sustainable value? I think this is something we have not, we should not change. But on the other hand, Ishiyama-san's talks, you talked about the high density in Shibuya ward, but no community. I would like to show you the slide. So I have two locations for living. Shibuya Cast, near Miyashita Park in Shibuya Ward. There is one development and project. Tokyo came up with this complex project. And in this facility, from the 13th floor to the 17th floor, and they extended the family program under the program of a SHIFT, and the association named SHIFT rents the ownership of those flats in order to determine what kind of families are going to be available. The community side will make a decision on that. So there is an interview with each individual in order to agree into the family-like ties, that the few months old babies as well, and they are raising children together. And it is a cooperative type And so that a certain amount of money is deposited. The amount changes, like 0 yen or 3,000 yen. This is a kind of a joint life project. This community, as a matter of fact, in terms of the social class, the income gap is different. Income is different. A monk or a hippie-like man is living, and the high net worth worker of the consulting firm also lives. So it is a mixed social community, social class community. And from the 16th floor to the 16th floor, they are rented out. So completely different from this kind of the family. About 400,000 yen per month. That is the amount of the rent for those floors. So high class. And they come to this community as well. And that is an opportunity for them to be exposed to the different family and different community. And within this kind of community, they feel warmth and closeness to the community, and that the people are grateful and to any services, and then they can help each other in day-to-day life. So I think this is exactly the thing that is happening within this condominium. The social class divide is now softly and gradually melted. I think this is the urban issue that we face, and the problem is being solved. How is it possible to solve this kind of problem? For one thing, when you are going to join this community, or those who are living in the upper floors, the explanation of this community is fully explained, is given. There is a family member interview. Do they sign any document? The rental document to be signed with the Tokyo housing company. And then they can write down, add up to 4 persons. The rent ranges from 100,000 to 1,500, and then all of a sudden that those few people who are not related will jointly work together, join the community. Well, it is difficult to do it at once. I think the key is sharing the value. Even if there is a difference of the social background, they can come together and assemble and live together. I think the concept of value may differ, but the dialogue and the self-transformation are the 2 key words. Without any titles, people need to be ready for talks and negotiation. And these aptitudes should be found out through the interviews. Different social class people get together in city environment. That's what it is about the city. Social class is visible, but the set of values is invisible. But through SNS, you will be able to find that any friends that you feel that you have the same value set may turn out to be different. And I got friends with you, and then you uploaded the different posts of eating ramen, and I felt close to you. Including the physical aspect of the city, being connected with the new sets of values, that is going to be a new form of community going forward. And we will be able to discern the people based on the perception of the values, and that has been revealed through the pandemic. But there are different films, like working at the BCG and others. They are all quantumized. Therefore, they are going to be combined together. You can be creative in the real physical environment, and they can get together. Toyoda-san, what do you think?
Now, in terms of the context of COVID-19, to the individual, there is also individual and group can be juxtaposed. Ishiyama-san said that we're becoming more altruistic. I think that is the right approach for dealing with problems such as global warming. It's contribution to society. You have to have a high level of consciousness. If you try, it's very difficult to become altruistic. But even though it is not direct profit, but if you know that there could be a return coming to you if you make a contribution not to an individual but to a group, then I think when you are able to experience this, and if a system is established to enable such a process, I think people will become more altruistic and be more in line with contributing to society. And altruism is not only for others, but it's for yourself as well. And to have a system to enable such a process is very important. Perhaps digital has had an impact as well. I think digital will have a significant impact on values. Currently, the devices are connected through action, but in the 2040, in the digital age, I think it's going to become more seamless. And people will feel that we are already connected by having the device. So that means that common values can be shared more easily. The relationship between individuals will be enabled through digital, and this is going to have an impact on consciousness. Andre, and we have a question. Values can connect people and allocate within the city. Do you see this kind of movement? Do you see signs of this in Europe? The sense of values having an impact on the surrounding environment.
Was the question about values or?
Yeah. 価値観要するに
So I'm talking about there are social classes, and this is determining where we live, and our areas of activity are determined by social class. But regardless of income or the social class, is it possible to establish a community with common values so that activities can be pursued together? And do you think this kind of relationship can be established going forward?
I think they are absolutely necessary. One of the problems that we have seen in cities, especially in recent decades, has been of sorting of individuals according to class, sorting of individuals according to race, sorting of individuals according to age. So we end up with age communities in certain parts of the city or in the outskirts of the city, and then a city center for the young more than anything. And every research that goes into that says this is bad, that diversity is good. When you bring people from different ethnic origins together, when you bring people from different social classes together, when you bring people from different ages, from children to elderly people together, that creates not just a more livable city, but also more capacity to put people that think and come from different backgrounds together and generate the seeds for greater social, cultural, and economic dynamism. And this is something that needs to be done. But here I want to highlight a word of warning. There's a big trend mainly coming from the United States that highlights that this can be done by densifying big cities, by allowing the builders to come in and build larger tower blocks, skyscrapers, densify so they can live in the city center because it's environmentally friendly, socially friendly, is going to trigger down a reduction of prices. I'm not against more building, and I'm not against having the private sector coming in with schemes, as were said before, of mixed use for high rents and low rents. Having said that, many of these schemes actually fall short of what is being decided. So there's a role for the public sector. There's a role for local governments to come in. There's a role for planners and to decide and to be bolder on building housing, allowing housing associations to be built, like it's happening in places like Copenhagen or Stockholm or Gothenburg, or also for more role for social housing. When you have all that, you're going to have truly mixed communities that can create this buzz, can create this interaction that would lead to not just more dynamic cities from an economic point of view, but also more livable and more socially integrated cities.
なるほど。やっぱり都市っていうの
Well, speaking of cities, we have a hope for the future. And there should be a kind of obligation that we have to work on. As Andrés mentioned, this is the necessity, and that is extremely important. And then in such an environment, the density, for example, in terms of the city, will play an important role still. But on the other hand, digital aspect, and this time around, speaking of the pandemic we are going through, if there is any change caused by that, the vision of a city is going to be easier to be materialized, even the private sector as well. I think the Tokyo, which is a housing company that is working in Shibuya. So what do you think of that? I would like to ask that question of two of you. Mori Building and Tokyo. Mori Building focuses on the inner city and the suburban and the inner and the resort, and that is taken care of by Tokyo. Therefore, the different kinds of ranges of services are being highlighted in the multi-layered format. And I think this is a strong asset that Google would not be able to emulate. So that it is a multi-layered approach and the flexibility and liquidity closer to the quantumization is achieved. So I think it is extremely important to keep the contact point with the physical world. That kind of centers should be put in place from the viewpoint of the business model. I think that is missing at the moment for many because most of them are closed in many ways. Social experience Andrés was talking about, they have to be pursued beyond disciplines. Tokyo has that kind of experiment, and the Mori Building has a very strong assets in the inner center, and how they are going to be deployed outside of the city, and that would expand the horizon. Thank you very much. Well, it is going to be the very last moment of the discussion, Ishiyama-san. There should be a vision of a city that has been clarified through the experience in the pandemic. And the crucial role of a city is important. The density is also important. But the vision and the dream that we would like to pursue in a city, how each citizen will be able to make contribution to that, including the role of digital technologies. I think I may overlap what I have already mentioned. In Tokyo, how will we be able to own civic pride, including Mori Building, providing quality space to the citizens, that's for one thing. But at the same time, the citizens have to own civic pride in the community. How the private sector and the public sector will be able to assist in such efforts, which is extremely more important than ever. I wonder if you can take a question and answer time in this session. No? No time. Sorry. Well, there were some inconveniences caused in the first half of this session. Sorry about that. With this, I would like